That night, the rain poured so loudly, it drowned my sob. I curled up beside a smoky stove, 7 months pregnant, in a kitchen that smelled of old onions and forgotten dreams. They said I didn't deserve the guest room. They said I was just a village girl who trapped their son. But they didn't know. Their father, Babaye, was watching, and what he did next turned the whole family upside down. Sira was a simple girl from a small fishing village. She grew up learning how to clean fish, fetch water, and care for her family with love. She didn't have fancy clothes or a big education, but her heart was full of kindness. When she met Miko, everything changed. He was studying to become a civil engineer and had come to her village for a project. They fell in love, slowly and deeply. Meko didn't care that Sira was poor. He loved her for who she was, gentle, honest, and full of life. When Meko told his family he wanted to marry Sira, they were not happy. His mother, Naya, especially was angry. She had dreamed of her son marrying a rich girl from the city, someone with class and background. To her, Sira was nothing more than a poor village girl trying to climb up by trapping her son. But Meko didn't listen. He followed his heart and married Sira anyway. On the day Sira came to their big house for the first time as a bride, Naya didn't even smile. She looked at Sira from head to toe and then turned away. That same evening, she said coldly, "You can stay, but don't expect to be treated like one of us." Her voice had no warmth. Her eyes had no love. The rest of the family stayed quiet. Some even laughed quietly behind Sira's back. They didn't see her as a wife or a daughter-in-law. To them, she was an outsider who didn't belong. Sira stood there quietly, holding her small bag, her heart heavy, but her head held high. She didn't fight back. She didn't cry. She just promised herself she would stay strong no matter what. She had no idea what kind of pain waited for her in the days to come. But in that moment, she still believed that love was enough. She still believed that Meko would protect her, and that maybe, just maybe, his family would come to see her heart. But what she didn't know was, this house wasn't just cold, it was cruel. And she was about to face the hardest days of her life, alone. As days passed, Sira's stomach began to show. She was pregnant, and while it should have been a time of joy, it became a time of pain. Her face would light up when she touched her growing belly, whispering soft words to her unborn child. But the house around her never smiled back. The moment her baby bump became noticeable, the taunts grew louder. Naya, her mother-in-law, started calling the baby a mistake. She would say things like, "This is what happens when village girls trap city men," and walk off like Sira was nothing. Every word felt like a cut to Sira's heart. Meko, her husband, had work that kept him far away most of the time. He would call sometimes, ask how she was, but he had no idea what was truly happening at home. Sira didn't want to trouble him. She thought, "I'll bear it, for the baby, for love." So she stayed quiet, even when her sister-in-law laughed at how Sira cooked, saying her food smelled like the village, even when they mocked how she spoke, mimicking her soft village accent like it was a joke. They would look at her old clothes and whisper to each other, loud enough for her to hear, "She doesn't belong here." Still, Sira tried to smile. She cleaned, cooked, greeted them with respect, and hoped that one day their hearts would soften. But things only got worse. One evening, Naya called her into the living room. "The guest room is for family," she said coldly. "Go take your things. You'll sleep in the kitchen from now on." Sira blinked in shock. She was 7 months pregnant. Her legs hurt, her back ached, and now they wanted her to sleep on the cold floor beside pots and firewood. She stood silently for a moment, her eyes stinging with tears, but she said nothing. She nodded and walked to the kitchen, carrying her small pillow and a thin bedsheet. That night, as everyone else slept in warm rooms with soft beds, Sira lay curled up on the cold tile, listening to the sound of rats and distant thunder. She held her belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mike, but we'll survive this." No one asked if she was okay. No one brought her water or checked on her. She was pregnant, yes, but in that house, she was treated like a burden, unwanted, forgotten, and yet she stayed because she still believed in love, still hoped for change, not knowing someone was quietly watching. Every night, when the rest of the house went quiet and the lights were off, Sira would spread her thin mat on the kitchen floor. The tiles were cold, and sometimes she could feel the dampness beneath her. The smell of smoke from the fire pot and old cooking oil never left the air. Her back ached badly, and her feet were always swollen. She would try to stretch, try to find a comfortable position, but it was never easy. She would curl up beside the firewood, hugging her belly and whispering soft prayers. Sleep never came fully. She would drift in and out, waking up with every small sound. A rat running by, the wind tapping the windows, or the cold biting her skin. Some nights she cried quietly into her pillow. Not loud, just soft, muffled sobs so no one would hear. She didn't want their pity. She didn't want to give them one more reason to laugh. What hurt the most was not the hard floor, not even the smoke. It was the silence. No one checked on her. No one asked if she needed anything. She was pregnant, alone, and treated like she didn't exist. One night, everything became too much. She got up to boil water to clean herself before sleeping. Her legs were tired, her head spinning from exhaustion and hunger. As she stood over the pot, the steam rising to her face, her vision became blurry. Her hands shook. Before she could call for help, everything went dark. She fainted. She fell to the floor with a soft thud. No one heard it. No one came. Hours passed. When she finally opened her eyes, it was still dark. Her head hurt. The side of her face was pressed against the floor, and the pot of water had spilled beside her. Her clothes were wet. She slowly sat up, confused and scared, looking around the empty kitchen. Not one person had come to check why the water hadn't boiled. Not one person had noticed she was missing from the rest of the house. She pulled herself to the mat, dragging her body inch by inch, and lay down again. Tears rolled down her face. She whispered to her baby, "It's just us, my love, just us." That night, as her body trembled and her heart broke, she realized something deep. She wasn't just unwanted, she was invisible, but even then she didn't give up, because in her heart, she still held on to a little hope. No one in the house knew that Babaye, Meko's father, had already come back from Ghana. He didn't tell anyone he was returning early. He simply arrived one quiet eve, holding his old brown bag and leaning on his walking stick. His flight was earlier than planned, but instead of entering the house with noise or greeting, he stayed silent. He chose to stay in the small back room, the one near the garden, away from everyone's eyes. He didn't want anyone to know he was there just yet. From that quiet corner, Babaye watched everything. He saw Sira walk with her head down every morning, holding her lower back as she tried to move her heavy body. He heard the hurtful things Naya said to her. He watched how Sira carried her plate to the kitchen after eating alone, always the last to eat, and always the first to be blamed. He noticed how she never raised her voice, never answered back, no matter how cruel the words thrown at her were. He had seen her the day they forced her to move to the kitchen. He stood in the hallway, behind the curtain, as Naya pointed toward the guest room and told her to leave. Babaye didn't move, but inside, his chest tightened, his lips pressed together. He gripped his walking stick a little harder. Late at night, when everyone else was asleep, Babaye stayed up. He listened to Sira's soft cries from the kitchen. He saw her pass by with her tiny mat and thin blanket. He watched her limp from swollen feet and struggle to bend down. And when she fainted that night by the firepot, he heard the sound. He almost rushed to her, but stopped. He wanted to see if anyone else would notice. No one did. They kept sleeping. The house stayed dark, and Sira, once again, was left all alone. Babaye's heart was heavy, but he didn't say anything yet. He needed to be sure. He needed to watch a little longer. His silence wasn't weakness. It was waiting. Deep in his mind, old memories started to wake up. Memories of another girl, many years ago. A girl who once faced the same pain. A girl he lost because his own family didn't approve. This time, he promised himself, he would not stay silent forever. But for now, he watched. Quietly, carefully, waiting for the right moment to step in. Because what the rest of the family didn't know was that Babaye had seen everything, and he would not forget. One quiet morning, Sira was sweeping the small corner of the kitchen where she slept. The house was calm, with only the sound of birds outside and a few pots clanking softly as she cleaned. Her hands moved slowly, tired from a sleepless night. As she bent down to pick up a piece of paper, a folded letter slipped out from her old wrapper. It fluttered to the ground and landed right near the doorway. She didn't notice. That letter wasn't meant for anyone to see. Sira had written it days ago, one night when her heart felt too heavy and her tears wouldn't stop. It was addressed to her unborn baby, the only one who had given her strength to keep going. In that letter, she poured out her heart. She wrote about the pain, the loneliness, the nights on the kitchen floor. She wrote about how she missed her own mother, and how hard it was to smile in a house where everyone wanted her gone. The words were soft, but full of truth. She ended the letter with something that came straight from her soul. If I do not make it, know that you were always loved, even in the cold. That morning, Babaye was walking past quietly. He had come to the kitchen door, thinking maybe he could finally speak to Sira, maybe just check if she needed anything. But before he could say a word, he saw the letter lying on the floor. He bent slowly, picked it up, and started reading without knowing what it was. Each word hit him like a stone. He sat down on a nearby stool, letter shaking in his hands. His eyes filled with tears he didn't expect. He had seen Sira suffer silently. He had watched her carry her pain like a heavy load. But reading that letter made him feel every bit of her sadness. It wasn't just what she'd written, it was how she wrote it. The quiet strength, the hidden fear, the love she had for her baby, even in the middle of such cruelty. Babaye didn't move for a long time. The letter stayed in his hand, and his heart stayed open. That simple piece of paper, meant for a baby not yet born, changed something deep inside him. He now knew he could no longer keep watching in silence. Something had to change, and he would be the one to begin it. The next morning, the breakfast table was full, just like always. Plates were being passed, spoons clinking softly, and conversations buzzing about useless things. No one expected anything different, but today, something was not the same. Babaye walked in. It had been weeks since he joined the family at the breakfast table. Everyone paused for a second, surprised to see him. He usually stayed in his room, quiet and alone. But today, he walked in slowly with his walking stick, looking calm but firm. He didn't say much at first. He greeted them softly, then looked around the table. Then, in a voice louder than usual, he said, "Where is Sira?" Everyone turned to look at him. Naya raised her eyebrow. "She eats in the kitchen," she replied coldly, like it was nothing important. But Babaye wasn't having it. He turned to the house help and said, "Go and bring her here. Tell her she's to sit beside me." Everyone froze. The room went quiet. No one moved. Even Naya looked shocked. The spoon in her hand stopped in midair, and she stared at her husband like she had heard something strange. A few minutes later, Sira walked in slowly, confused and nervous. Her eyes moved from one face to another, unsure why she had been called. Her hands were still wet from washing dishes, and she didn't expect to stand in front of the whole family like this. Babaye pulled out the chair beside him. "Sit," he said gently. Sira sat down quietly, her heart beating fast. Then Babaye looked around the table. His voice was steady, but filled with power. "From today," he said, "this woman, Sira, is the lady of this house, and she will be treated with the full respect she deserves." No one spoke. The silence was deep. Even the sound of spoons and chewing stopped. Naya's mouth tightened. She looked like she wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her pride had been hit. Her control over the house had been shaken, all in one moment. Meko's sister stared at her plate. The rest of the family didn't know where to look, but Sira sat there quietly, unsure if it was real or just a dream. For the first time since she entered that house, someone had spoken for her, and not just someone, the man of the house, and nothing would ever be the same again. After breakfast, the house was still tense. Naya stayed quiet, but her eyes were sharp. Sira helped clear the table, her hands shaking slightly. She still couldn't believe what had just happened. But later that day, when the house was quiet again, Babaye called everyone to the sitting room. One by one, they gathered. Meko had just returned home that morning and was still confused. Naya sat with her arms crossed, and the rest of the family waited to hear what he had to say. Babaye sat in his favorite chair, holding his walking stick and looking more serious than ever. Then, in a calm voice, he began to speak, not just to defend Sira, but to finally reveal something he had never told anyone. He looked at Meko and said, "Many years ago, before I met your mother, I loved a girl." His voice was soft but steady. She was poor, very poor, but her heart was gold, just like Sira. Everyone sat still, listening. My family didn't approve. They said she wasn't good enough for me. They said I'd be throwing away my future. I was young and foolish. I listened to them. I left her. He paused, his eyes heavy with old pain. She died a year later. No husband, no child, just heartbreak. The room was silent. Even Naya didn't say a word. I have carried that regret for the rest of my life, Babaye continued. And now, I see the same thing happening again in this house. A good woman, suffering in silence, simply because she came from less. He turned to Sira, who sat quietly in the corner, her eyes wide and wet. I will not make the same mistake again. I won't bury another woman who was unloved under my roof. His voice shook slightly, but he meant every word. He had watched Sira carry pain, carry silence, and still show respect to the people who hurt her, and that reminded him too much of the woman he once lost. I won't allow pride to destroy this family, he added. Not this time. The air in the room felt different after that. His words didn't just defend Sira, they exposed the truth everyone had ignored. Babaye had finally opened his heart, and in doing so, he made it clear. Sira wasn't just Meko's wife, she was family, and this time, no one could push her out. After Babaye shared his story, things in the house changed quickly. He didn't wait for anyone's permission. That very evening, he asked Sira to move out of the kitchen and into the master bedroom, the biggest and most respected room in the house. It shocked everyone. Sira tried to refuse at first, saying she was fine in the kitchen, but Babaye looked her in the eyes and said, "You've suffered enough. That room is yours now." He didn't stop there. He called the whole family again and gave them clear instructions. From today, no one in this house will speak badly to or about Sira. No jokes, no insults, no silence. If anyone can't respect her, they should leave this house. The words hit hard. Meko's sister, who had always mocked Sira's cooking and her background, rolled her eyes and tried to argue, but Babaye didn't let her finish. "Pack your things," he told her. "You will stay with your aunt until you learn how to treat people with respect." Sira stood there, frozen. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. For the first time since she came into that house, someone was truly standing up for her. And not just anyone, but the head of the family. When Meko came back from his trip and heard what had happened, he was shocked. He sat beside Sira in the bedroom and held her hand. "I should have been here," he said quietly. "I had no idea it got this bad." His eyes were full of guilt, but Sira didn't say much. She was just happy to feel seen, but not everyone was happy. Naya, Miko's mother, said nothing in public, but behind closed doors her heart burned with anger. She had always controlled the house, the decisions, the people. Now, all of that was slipping from her hand, and because of a girl she never wanted. She watched as her husband praised Sira, as her son showed her love, and as her own daughter was sent away. Her pride was bruised, and her anger grew quietly inside her like a storm. She smiled during meals, acted calm, and said all the right things. But inside, she was making plans. She told herself, "This girl has ruined everything, but not for long," because Naya wasn't done. What no one knew was that while peace had entered the house, trouble was still breathing through one person, and she was ready to strike. Late one night, the rain was falling heavily outside. The wind howled through the windows, and the house was quiet. Sira was in her room, turning from side to side, trying to get comfortable. But something didn't feel right. A sharp pain shot through her belly, and she gasped. It came again, and again. Her heart raced. She knew this pain. It was time. The baby was coming. She called out, her voice weak but filled with panic. Naya was the first to hear. She stood by the door and watched Sira struggle, but she didn't move. She crossed her arms and said coldly, "You'll be fine. Women give birth every day." Then she turned away and left. Sira cried out louder. The pain was too much now. She couldn't move on her own. She needed help. That's when Babaye, who had been resting in the next room, heard her voice. He didn't wait. He grabbed his walking stick, rushed into her room, and saw her shaking in pain. Without a second thought, he dropped the stick, bent down, and carried her in his arms. "Hold on, my child," he whispered. He helped her into the car and drove her himself through the rain, never letting go of her hand. At every red light, he told her to breathe. At every scream, he said, "I'm here. I've got you." At the hospital, he didn't wait outside like others. He stayed beside her, holding her hand tightly through every contraction. His eyes were filled with worry, his lips praying silently. And finally, after hours of pain, a soft cry filled the room. The baby was here, a beautiful, healthy girl. Babaye's eyes filled with tears as he heard that first cry. He covered his face and wept, not from sadness, but from pure relief and deep love. Sira, lying weak but smiling, turned to him and said softly, "She's yours, our legacy." Those words touched his heart deeply. This child was not just Meko's daughter. She was a symbol of strength, of pain turned into love, of a quiet woman who stayed strong when no one stood by her. Babaye looked at the baby and then at Sira. "You are my daughter now," he said gently, "and this child is the light of our home." In that moment, everything changed. Not just for Sira, but for the whole family. Because true love isn't shown in words. It's shown when someone holds your hand when no one else will. Months passed. The baby grew strong, and Sira began to smile again. Genuine smiles, the kind that come from peace. The house was quieter now. Meko stood by her, more present than ever, and Babaye, as promised, never left her side. He would carry the baby around the house and proudly say, "This is my granddaughter," with joy in his voice. Every time he looked at Sira, he called her my daughter, not because she married his son, but because she had earned that place in his heart. As for Naya, things were different. She apologized one day, though her voice didn't carry much emotion. Sira listened quietly, nodded, but said very little. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. Her heart had already moved forward. She didn't carry hatred, but she remembered everything. Every cold night, every painful word, every moment she was left alone. Forgiveness came, but with quiet distance. Sira learned something important. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean they should still sit at your table. She no longer tried to fit into their world. Instead, she built her own. Months later, she opened a small shelter near the village, a safe place for pregnant women who had been abandoned or mistreated by their in-laws. She called it Warm Arms. Women came there with nothing but fear and swollen bellies, and they left with hope and support. Sira greeted each one with a gentle smile and soft words. "You're not alone." She used her own story to help others find strength. She would tell them, "You're not less because they pushed you away. You're strong because you're still standing." And every week, Babaye would visit the shelter, sometimes with fresh food, sometimes just to sit with the women and tell them, "You matter." He became a father figure to many who had no one. His bond with Sira grew even deeper, not by blood, but by choice. Because sometimes, the real family isn't the one you're born into. It's the one that chooses to see you, stand by you, and hold your hand through the fire. Sira didn't become bitter. She became better. And though her journey started with pain, it led her to purpose. She no longer slept beside firewood and tears. Now, she lights a fire of hope in the hearts of others. If this story touched your heart, don't scroll without sharing it. Someone out there needs this reminder. You are not alone. You are not unloved. You are stronger than they ever thought. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Comment, "Family is chosen." If you believe love makes a home, not blood. Follow for more powerful stories that heal, inspire, and awaken the soul.